This trip was dictated by the weather, and the forecast earlier on in the trip wasn't flash. Airfares and leave had been booked months in advance, so plans were constantly altered as conditions changed. It was an early start for the team from Auckland. Some got up at 4 a.m. to catch early flights to Christchurch. It was just a short hop for me down from Nelson. The team, our esteemed leader Andrew, Uta, and Christopher and Michael in front. Our heavier than normal packs loaded with 10 days food and warm gear for sleeping on the tops took the body a while to adapt, and by the time we reached Cannibal Gorge hut, most were happy to stop here. The weather forecast had already meant we wouldn't be able to get over Pasco Pass into the East Matakitaki before the weather deteriorated, so there was no benefit continuing on to Ada Pass. After a good night's sleep, we left the hut at 8 a.m. with the intention to walk through to Christopher Hut. We arrived at Ada Pass Hut after 70 minutes on the trail, and after a short break we continued over a very flat Ada Pass. From here the valley opened up and travel was quick along the valley floor. The honking of Canadian geese was a constant reminder that these were one of the most dominant species in the area, with bird excrement everywhere on the grassy flats. As the day progressed, the cloud lowered and validated our change of plans to not attempt a crossing of the Spenser Mountains. We checked out the historic Ada Colours hut before wandering down to an empty Christopher hut. The forecast that night meant we would be staying here for a few nights. We didn't want to head up the Waiau, as that's on TA and the huts would probably be full. Day 3 was a hut day, so in the morning we collected firewood and filled up the woodshed. Whilst windy, it was very pleasant lying out in the grass looking down the valley as long as you covered up from the ferocious sandflies. Strong gusts of wind barreled down the valley overnight, and by morning the temperature had dropped and the rain set in. All the hut reading material was read cover to cover, and then boredom set in and hut antics started. Some of the attempted yoga positions were hilarious for those of us reading cocooned in our sleeping bags. The rain had stopped overnight and the lifting cloud exposed heaps of snow well down into the tree line. With this amount of snow, there was little point attempting a crossing of Thompson, Derville and David Saddles over the next few days, so we moved on to Plan E, or was that Plan F? We now plan to spend the next few days walking up past Lake Guyon and down the Stanley River to Pool Hut, and hopefully by then the snow will have melted and we can get up onto the Zampa tops. Luckily most of the rain had been locked up as snow on the top, so crossing the Ada and Waiau rivers wasn't a problem. We now picked up the St. James cycle trail that led to Lake Guyon. This area is stunning, and I really enjoyed walking up to Stanley Vale and seeing the smoke rising from the historic hut chimney. We had a quick chat to the one occupant and the just arrived trekkers before continuing on to find a campsite beside the Stanley River. We have Andrew buried in the scrub, and Christopher over on one side of the track and myself and Uta on the other. There had been a good frost overnight, so we packed away wet tents. Mist hung in the valley as we descended down a dirty, goose-polluted Stanley River. We enjoyed the view down this spectacular valley as the mist burnt off. Once we had dried our tents, we started up the MacArthur track, which was part of the cycle trail before the bridge got taken out. We had a steep ascent up to Saddle Spur before enjoying a quick break and taking in the view north up the valley. We now walked along the Henry track that took us across the Henry River, where we branched off and headed up to Delta Stream, where we camped for the night. We had planned to access the tops via spot height 1404 from here, but the forecast had more wind with strong gusts. We would have to come up with yet another plan. Today we plan to walk past Ann Hut and access the headwaters of the Henry River to camp. The new Ann Hut sits in the middle of a large river terrace and must get hammered by the prevailing westerlies. Back down next to the river we could see a large herd of horses further up the valley who were getting very agitated at our presence. Once we got nearer, we were very fortunate to see the semi-wild herd of horses galloping past us with foals in tow. As the grassy valley floor narrowed, we discovered a fabulous old hunter's campsite in the beech trees which provided shelter from the gusty wind. If the wind wasn't too bad in the morning, the intention was to climb up onto the Zampa tops. We didn't get off to a very auspicious start to the day as Uta's new tent had a technical malfunction. The tent pole snapped whilst under no wind load and tore a hole in the fly. The tops would have to wait for another day as we worked out a plan to repair the damage. Once repaired, we had a chilled out afternoon lazing in the sun. Finally, we had a reasonable forecast, so tomorrow we plan to climb up a spur further up the valley to access the tops. We were fortunate that the hunters who had set up the campsite had established a ribbon trail all the way up the intended route we had chosen. Once above the bushline, we could validate our intended route over a saddle, then sidling under Zampa, past the tarns and up onto the ridgeline. The views into the Henry headwaters distracted us as we climbed up from the tarns, and once on the ridgeline we could see vehicles moving down on Lewis Pass, and those foolish enough gained mobile coverage. From here we wandered along the ridgeline and located a reasonably exposed campsite close to a tarn. We finally enjoyed a sunset with a view and then descended back down to the campsite to have a disturbed sleep from the tent taking a battering from the strong wind gusts. The wind built during the night and Uta quickly dropped her tent in the morning, not wanting to overstress the repairs.
We're walking along a fault line.
The plan today was to explore northeast along the tops towards Philosopher's Knob, then return to pack up and make our way down to Ada Pass Hut. We travelled along the ridgeline for approximately 2k before returning with a very strong headwind. With the clouds lowering and the wind increasing, we packed up in record time, being ultra careful that the tents didn't fly away as we lowered them. A quick descent off the ridgeline saw us into a more benign environment. Once into the bushline, we followed a sporadic ground trail down the spur to the hut. Our last day out saw us on the trail by 8 AM with an easy, mostly downhill walk past Cannibal Gorge hut to the trailhead at Lewis Pass. The walk out with much lighter packs was a breeze, and after about 4 hours we arrived back at Lewis Pass to find our shuttle already there waiting for us. Whilst we didn't achieve many of the objectives of the trip, we enjoyed a great 11 days in the backcountry, checked out some new trails and had a fun time. We have another 10-day trip in 3 weeks' time, and I'm looking forward to this Albert Burn East Matukituki adventure. A big thank you to Uta for some fabulous pics.